Welcome to another movie review. This time I'm joined by Brizer and Blackbird, and we might also be having Southern Nordic on at some stage here. So we're going to talk about a movie from 1996. It's called Fast Food Nation. It was released in Spain anyway, in 2007, and that's when I saw it first. It was directed by Richard Linklater, and it's adapted from a book by Eric Schlosser called Fast Food Nation, The Dark Side of the All-American Meal. It was produced by Jeremy Thomas and Malcolm McLaren, and it made a very scanty amount at the box office, $2.2 million. So I'll go around. I'll just mention the cast as well. Some of the actors and actresses. Greg Kinnear, he plays Don Anderson. Ethan Hawke plays Pete. He has a minor role, really, as does Avril Lavigne. And we have Paul Dano as Brian, Patricia Arquette as Cindy. Bruce Willis is in it as well. He has a cameo. And we have Bobby Cannavale, who plays Mike, and there are other actors and actresses we'll get into. There are a lot. It's a massive cast. It is a massive cast, and I think a lot of these actors, I think they just wanted to take on the role. So there's some. Southern Nordic, are you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can. I'll bring you in now in a second. If you could just mute your audio for a moment. Cheers, man. Okay, so with that out of the way, we'll go to Brizer first. Brizer, how are you? And when was the first time you watched this movie? And what are your initial impressions?
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, good to be back for another one. I watched this for the very first time last weekend when you sent me the link that you were going to be doing it. I wasn't able to make it though last Sunday to do the review, but I did manage to watch it, and never heard of it before. And there's quite a few big names in it, but quite an interesting film actually, and really kind of going into the details of like fast food and what that's all about, and certainly would kind of put you off fast food, I think, for good, wouldn't it? That's the impression I got from it anyway. And lots of different narratives going on in it, lots of different things, subplots and everything happening in it. So I'm trying to remember all the different scenes, so hopefully when we go around the table, we'll remember all the different things that are coming up. But there was a lot of very good scenes in it, and it just sums up this whole idea of just fast food and how it's just thrown out there for people, and we really do not know what's in this stuff at all, and certainly not good for you. And myself personally, I don't go near these places like McDonald's, Burger King, any of these fast food joints. I stay well clear of them, just knowing that. And I also had a niece who worked in McDonald's during the summer, and she swore that she will never eat in a McDonald's ever again after that. Right, so there you go. So over to Blackbird, I suppose. Next.
Greetings all. Thanks for having me on today. Yes, interesting enough, I remember when this film came out in 2006, but I never got to see it. And so the first time I saw this film was about an hour ago. So I bit the bullet and rented it from YouTube and downloaded it and watched it this morning. So, that's about as prepared as I am. And I was expecting something completely different from my memory of it. I thought it was more like going to be like a Michael Moore type of film, and instead it was Napoleon Dynamite meets Upton Sinclair's The Jungle at McDonald's. Especially with all I kept thinking of was Upton Sinclair's famous quote about it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it, and his famous book from 1904, when he spent time in the Chicago stockyards and was writing about all the corruption in that book, The Jungle. And, this was just basically that book with the backdrop of, modern Kalergi plan, Cloud Piven plan, Globo Homo modernization. So I can't wait to pull this one apart. So back to you.
All right, and just to say to Brizer, we won't be going through all the scenes in this movie. Not a chance. Not a chance. We'd be here for about 10 hours if we did so.
Oh, yeah.
And I will say as well to Blackbird, you mentioned you thought it would be more like a Michael Moore documentary. A lot of people, I spoke to them over the years about this movie, and as soon as I say Fast Food Nation, people always say to me, oh yeah, that's the documentary about the guy who ate McDonald's for a month. So they're conflating it with Super Size Me, which came out around the same time. This film is, I think it offers much more than Super Size Me. So now we'll bring on the other guest this evening, or this afternoon, his time, and that is Southern Nordic, aka Sono. So how are you? And when's the first time you watched this film and your initial impressions?
Hey, I want to say thank you. I apologize that I was a few minutes late. Had a situation with my young'un. We had to change her diaper and whatnot, so I apologize for that. It's nice to meet you, Brizer. I've listened to some of your streams, and I know Blackbird9 and Betwixt. I've talked to them several times. But this movie, the first time I had seen it was likewise. It was just last weekend. I also had to rent it from YouTube. I had heard of this movie before, and it was interesting. As I was watching it, I watched about an hour of it. I went and took a shower. And as I was in the shower, I was thinking to myself, this book or this movie sounds like something that the author Eric Schlosser would have written, because back when I was in college, I had read a book of his called Reefer Madness. It was talking about legalization of marijuana, but there's also two other sections in this book that talks about the strawberry fields and the Mexican labor that is used for those strawberry fields. And then the last section is also about a Jewish man named Reuben Sturman, who was very influential in promoting pornography. I would say that I do not agree in the least with Eric Schlosser's politics, but the Reefer Madness section of the book, I actually used it for a speech, some of his work, for a public speaking class when I was in college. So I was really impressed. I felt like that was, I guess, astute on my part. I was like, wow, it actually is a book by Eric Schlosser. I've got a quote here, and the way I kind of wanted to frame my perspective is looking at the labor struggle. I have a quote here from Jack London. He was the author of White Fang. He also had written a book called Valley of the Moon. But in this quote, he says, "I am a socialist, a revolutionary socialist, an up on the hind legs fighting socialist Labor Party man. But above all else, I am a white man." I thought that was a very interesting quote. This is something that I've been kind of studying maybe the last couple of years, just on and off. The racial aspect of the early labor movement, the IWW, the International Workers of the World. This movie, I thought it was a decent movie. It's not like something that's going to blow your hair back. I was actually surprised at how many famous stars were in this movie. Like you mentioned a minute ago, Bruce Willis, Avril Lavigne, Ethan Hawke. They just had little cameo appearances. So, but the movie struck on some things, and it left quite the impression upon me. I think it really did a pretty good job of documenting and showing what basically postmodern America is actually all about. But yeah, that's just some of my initial thoughts. I'll hand it back to you, Betwixt.
All right, thanks for that, Southern Nordic. Yeah, so we're going to go down I could say character arc, but yeah, I'll just say character arc of Don Henderson. Now, he's played by Greg Kinnear. And the movie starts with him. He's in an office. They're sitting around a table. he is the executive at a company called Mickey's, not Mickey D's, just plain old Mickey's fast food restaurant chain. And he and his team have come up with, a burger that's doing really well, and it's becoming the flagship of the company. It's not called the Big Mac, it's called the Big One. And you can see they're in California. It's an air-conditioned office. Nobody is uncomfortable. Nobody's sweating. They have a very comfortable environment. They're kind of in an ivory tower. And the CEO, he calls in Don, and he tells him that there's a bit of a problem with the Big One. And he says something like, I don't know, he goes through the statistics. He says there's fecal whatever. And Don is a midwit. He doesn't understand the word fecal. So the CEO has to tell him, Don, there's shit in our burgers. There's shit in the meat. Now, just getting into the character of Don Henderson, he seems like a nice guy. That's the impression I got. He seems like a nice guy. He's not the sharpest tool in the box. He's not dumb either, but he comes across as nice. He comes across as honorable in general. He's got a cushy job, and suddenly he's being sent to, I believe it's Colorado. He has to go to the slaughterhouse to find out how cow shit is getting into the meat. And I just want to mention before I pass it on to the rest of the guys here that the film grabbed me from the very start. In that first scene where they're talking about sales increasing and the Big One is doing well, and they're all just slapping each other on the back. We're doing great work, we're doing well. And they're talking about different demographics. It's successful with this demographic. And then they mention, if I can find it, they went to a school to get feedback from the kids. It's from Martin Luther King Elementary, and they tested the kids on 3 different boxes. And when I heard this, I was thinking, my God, these corporations, these juggernauts are everywhere. And what is it about Stalin? He says, give me a child at 6 or 7, and I'll give you the man. Well, here we have the corporations. The kids are sent to school. We think they're learning arithmetic and learning how to read, but in reality, they're being taught about brand recognition, and they're kind of slaves in a way that give back information that the corporation can use. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, we'll go on further with his story. I'll pass it on to Brizer now if you would like to say anything else, or if you want to bring this story forward.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of starts off with a lot of migrants trying to cross the border from Mexico into the States, and so you see like they're crossing the border, and there's guys on the other side who are ready to get them across and get them through. And Border Patrol comes along and stops some of them, and a lot of them get through anyway, and they manage to make their way to this meat processing plant in Colorado, and they think, well, we're made now, we're here. So you can kind of see that side where these big processing plants and these burger chains and everything are employing cheap labor and the migrant labor, and you can see that that's what's happening in America and in Europe now, where they're saying, well, we have a labor shortage because Americans or Europeans don't want to do this type of work anymore. So we have to get these people in to do it and pay them just basically minimum wage if they're lucky. So it kind of starts off that way, and then as I say, it moves into this character Don Anderson sitting in a plush office, and they're talking about the Big One, the big burger, and how popular it is. And of course, then they have a problem, as I said, because there's fecal matter in the meat, and he has to go to this. It's a town, it's a fictitious town, it's called Cody in Colorado, and the company is called Uniglobe Meatpacking, and it's this is where all the meat comes, and it's all processed and made into burgers. And obviously, the burger chain, the big one, whatever they're called, it's Mickey's Burger, isn't it? So you can see where they're trying to take it from McDonald's, Big Mac, Mickey. It's a kind of similar type of thing. So yeah, he's obviously quite shocked when he hears about this, and as you said, betwixt he's a kind of a he's got a plush job, and when he hears about this, well, something's got to be done about this, because we don't want people basically eating shit, right? So we need to sort this out. And of course, he goes to the processing plant anyway, and he does a tour of it, and but everything seems to be working fine. Everything's clean. They obviously know that he's coming, so they make sure everything's sorted out. And you can see, like, before he comes, all the workers are all doing, trying to get everything cleaned up, washing all the blood off the walls and stuff like that. And so he's quite happy that everything is good. And then he goes to a local burger joint to try a big one, and he's asking one of the other actors, played by Patricia Arquette, who works behind the counter, how's it like working in this, and she said, oh, it's okay, it's fine, it gets me through college and all the rest of it. But of course, there was another scene before that when there was another guy who also works in the burger joint. You can see him spitting on the burger as well, and we've heard of this happening, a lot in these places, and that didn't surprise me when I saw that. So it's one of the reasons why I tend to avoid these places, because you just don't know what you're getting and what these people are doing behind the facade of the counter, what's going on behind there. So yeah, then Don goes and he goes and meets a rancher played by Chris Christopherson, another big name that's in there. And his name is Rudy Martin, and he supplies the cattle to the plant. And they assure him that everything. I think from what I remember, he was saying that the regulations are ignored, and I'm not sure now whether he is actually is he standing up for the plant, because obviously he's providing cattle to it, or is he? I can't remember whether he was saying that. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
Sorry, Brizer. I think he's kind of against the plant, because he's the one who shines a light on what's going on in there. He tells Don about all the accidents. People are getting cut up in there, that the line is moving too fast, mistakes are being made, people are losing arms, etc. And there's something I think he used to deal with them, and he said they were horrible to deal with, decades ago. But he said now they're even worse to deal with, because they're much more powerful. And he points out what's happening as well, this urban sprawl, all these suburbs popping up in the middle of the desert, practically. I just go back, Brizer, because and thanks for bringing it forward, because that's going to save us a lot of time, because there is so much to discuss in this film. It's really incredible, and it's not a very long film, but there's so much going on. He does say, when he before he goes off on his business trip, he tells his wife, and then his wife says, could people die? And he's like, no, I don't think so. He said, that wouldn't be very good for the business. He said, rule number 1, or the golden rule, don't kill the customer. And it shows him then I think he's reading his story to his two boys, and he then tells them, he tells one of them, I'm going to miss whatever recital or whatever event is going on. I'm going to miss it. It's possible I'll miss it, but I'll be back by such a day. And this is why I say he is a nice guy. Generally, he is a nice guy, and even the way he explains to his kids, I'm not going to be around for a few days, but I'll try to be back by such a day. It just seems like a nice guy, very polite. But as we've already said, he works a very cushy job, and he's in for a rude awakening. So, Brizer, if you want to add anything else there, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, you see in the factory, health and safety is a major thing, and we see that in all these big corporations now. I mean, I had that my experience myself. Health and safety, everything's about health and safety, but there isn't really any health and safety going on. It's all about taking shortcuts and all that, you know. And health and safety is just there to kind of keep people in line, you know, to not question anything. Just, you know, it's health and safety and whatever. But things are obviously ignored, and so yes, there is shit getting into the meat, but you know, just clean it off. No one's going to notice, type of thing. And you have got the, you know, the Mexican laborers in there, who a lot of them don't speak English, so they just do what they're told. All they're interested in is getting that, you know, couple of $100 a week, whatever they get, so they can feed themselves and send something back to their families in Mexico. And so yeah, so that's where it kind of goes. But I said there's different subplots, and then he goes and meets the Bruce Willis character, which I think is very interesting. But I'll pass it back on to Blackbird now for his take to where he wants to go further.
Great observations. Yes. I'm like Southern Nordic. You know, first thing I always do is see, you know, who directed the film and who wrote it, right? And his observations about, you know, Eric Schlosser were just spot on. And it's interesting that his father was a Madison Avenue lawyer kind of guy who became a television executive and served as the CEO of our NBC here, which is one of the big three networks. From 1974 to 78. He was actually the guy who helped create Saturday Night Live, and he went to work for RCA. And so there's so much there. You could do a show just on his career and his son's career, but, you know, so these people, you know, definitely have a very different take on the world than I have. And so it's interesting what comes out in their films, and the fact that this guy based it on his book on Upton Sinclair's novel about the stockyards. And so when the film starts, the first thing I noticed was it's just, like you said, 1,000 short scenes sort of strung together. It just reminds me of, you know, French impressionistic art, where it's just these emotional little vignettes that, you know, string together to tell the story, right? So like you said, it's impossible to kind of break it down scene by scene. You just kind of have to go with well, these characters' development did this, and these characters' development did this, and, you know, everybody's individual storylines. But what really got me was the Madison Avenue marketing of the expression fast food nation being shown in the center of the screen in the red and yellow colors. And so one of the things in all of that Frankenscience research, you know, that was going on in the earliest part of the 20th century was, you know, just basically studying Gentile behavior, you know, from their taste buds to their olfactory, to their hearing, to their seeing, you know, what makes these goyim tick, and that how do they respond to colors? And they found that if you use the colors yellow and red, it will trigger a hunger response in you. You know, so this is right off the bat, it's there. This is about marketing and manipulation at the lowest level. You know, your food, you know, you think you want your food to be, you know, healthy for you and giving you nourishment, but you realize you're eating this Frankenfood that is basically designed to poison you in specific ways. And then so then you see this desert scene, and that's when the first illegals are seen, you know, coming through the desert, and you're like, okay, what does this have to do with fast food? But then you go to the boardroom scene, and I thought it was interesting. They chose to make all the board members straight white guy Gentiles, right? Instead of, you know, a diversity board meeting, it was all straight, you know, fraternity brother kind of goyim. And that they think that they're in charge. They think that they're powerful and their product's doing well and they're all making money, but they have a problem. And so like when we reviewed Wag the Dog, they have to bring in the fixer, and that's the Don character, where he's, you know, the nice guy who, he's, very, low spoken. He doesn't accuse, he asks questions, but he's the guy that they send in to investigate and smooth things over, because the company has a problem that these radical students managed to steal some of their meat frozen and did lab tests and showed that it was, loaded with fecal matter, but if it was cooked properly, it would, destroy any harm. But, the fact that it had it in it, it was beyond the limits, and they were going to go public. So you have to get in front of this PR curve, or it would be another Worms and McDonald's hamburgers from the 1970s. That was a huge PR fiasco. McDonald's really had a rough time pushing that down. And so you just see this guy, he's obviously that executive who has left his homeland, to pursue a career. And so he has his family in the suburbs and moving from job to job type of thing that, hopefully this will be a good steady job for the family and we can stay in one place for a while if this deal goes through, because right now everybody's making money, everybody's happy, but we have this problem. So I have to fly out. This is more important than your history presentation or whatever it is that he's having to tell his son he has to go out of town. He's going to miss something he had promised to do because this was more important. Work comes first. And so then, you see him meeting with the various people and, first going to the plant for the official tour and everything's spotless. They impress him with just how much care they take. But then he goes and starts working with, the locals who have seen the changes in the meatpacking company and how they treat the local employees, et cetera. And he starts learning a different story, including, the Chris Christopherson character who, his family's been ranching multi-generations out there with the old style of cattle farming. And his way of life is being destroyed by this new corporate lot farming technique. And so we can talk more about that later. But anyway, so that's basically, where this character Don is, that he's, being sent out to get ahead of a problem. And he's now discovering that there really is a problem, but they're trying to keep it from him. So back to you.
All right, thanks very much. And I will mention at the very end, Blackbird sent me a link to a podcast he did. And with his permission, I'll put that into the description of this video. So we move on to Southern Nordic. So Southern Nordic, what would you like to say about this character, Don Henderson or Anderson?
Well, there's a few things I was going to say. First, I wanted to address the product itself. There's the Goy Slop meme is gained in popularity over the last year. About 100 years ago, well, I would say over at least the last 70, 60 years, for the first time in mankind's history, we have developed a sort of civilizational caloric surplus. That means due to farming techniques, mass production agriculture, the development of various forms of fertilizer, we produce a caloric surplus nowadays. We have over the last, say, 60, maybe 70 years. So you have, and throughout mankind's history, we've had to contend with starvation, a lack of food, all these things up until, like I said, the last 60, 70 years. So you have to be in very dire social straits, a very dire social situation to starve today, or people starve due to, distribution problems. But the problem is, a lot of this food that is produced today, a lot of these extremely processed foods, the great Jonathan Bowden, he said that this modern processed food really, at its core, is a lot of just chemicals and gas. It's not good for you. There's a lot of health problems that come from it. And I mean, even the nutrition itself is of an extremely low quality in most cases. I just wanted to address that part of it. But the impression that I got off of Don is that I agree with what you all have said. I think he's a good man. I actually admire him for standing up to Harry Riddell, Bruce Willis's character, later in the movie. He is confronting him about, the situation with the fecal matter in the beef. But I also think Don, he represents this sort of sterile, sort of modern American suburban father. He has a decent job, but it's like I said, like you had mentioned, he's having to travel a lot. He's away from his family. He misses his son's, I can't remember which, it was his son had some sort of event, some sort of, I can't remember if it's a talent show or what. But I think he represents just the modern middle-class American father who is stressed out. He has a really sort of just sterile and in some ways soulless existence. There was one scene in particular that actually just stuck out to me for some reason. He's in the hotel. He had just checked into his hotel, I believe, there in Cody, Colorado, and he's talking on the, I'm not sure if he's talking on the phone or whatever, but he's getting himself dressed, I guess, to go to the meat packing plant, and he's got the TV on, and you can hear that there is porn playing on the TV, and like he's just going about his business, and then he like looks at the TV just kind of in awe at once. I don't know, for some reason that scene stuck out to me, like, that he has a really vanilla life in a way. But I do think he's a good character. I think he's a good man, like you said, not the brightest man, but I think he represents, in a way, he's a victim himself. He's a compensated victim, but he's a victim himself of this sort of capitalistic corporate monstrosity that we see in America today. Excuse me, but I really liked Chris Christopherson's character, and I don't know if any of you know anything about Chris Christopherson's life. He has a very fascinating life. He's most famous as, a country singer. He was one of the Highwaymen with Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and some of those other guys. I can't remember if Willie Nelson was a part of it, maybe Hank Jr., but his life story is actually fascinating. I wanted to talk a little bit about, let's see here in my notes, Coco, Sylvia, and Raul. Those are the three Mexican characters. Do you care if I jump ahead and talk about this betwixt, or did you want to save it?
No, we're going to get into them in about, I don't know, 20 minutes.
Yeah,
so.
that's fine.
We'll try. We're going to divide it up. We're going to finish off about Don now. We'll talk about Amber, her mother, her super cool uncle. Such a cool guy, the cool guy, Jim.
Yeah.
And then finally we'll talk about the Mexicans, and then we'll just go through what we think of the fast food industry, having watched this film and all that. So, yeah. So for the moment, thanks for that, Southern Nordic. I'll just wrap up, Don. If there's anything else you'd like to say before that, Southern Nordic.
That's all I have for right now.
Yeah, okay. So just getting back to what Southern Nordic mentioned, that scene where he's in the hotel and there's porn on the TV. Like, I don't know, it just seems strange. Like, it mustn't be the nicest hotel going if when you walk in, the TV's on and the porn is there for you. I don't know, does he actually rent out porn when he's checking out? I can't remember. Does he put some DVDs on it's in my head, but maybe it didn't happen. Anyway, yeah. He's a victim to vices just like anyone else. And you guys just mentioned food there, and Southern Nordic was talking about how, the quantity of food has increased, but the quality has gone down. And I think, I hear a lot of bad things about vegetable oil. And anytime, it's kind of been a recent thing. When I'm in the supermarket, I pick whatever I'm going to buy, I pick it up and I just check. And it's almost like 70% of the items in a supermarket have vegetable oil in them, and I just find that very, very odd, that you're using this thing in so much food. It should be it should be said that this film would have come out, it wouldn't have been too long after, maybe a decade after all the hullabaloo about mad cow disease. And, I remember reading articles about, this disease was coming from cattle being fed bone meal, and the bone meal contained cattle. And, it was called BSE. And then if a human got it, it was called CJD. And, there were various videos circulating of people who had got this brain disease. The brain just rots. And I think there's something in Indonesia, it's called kuru or something like that, where when humans ate humans, you had cannibals. They called it the laughing disease as well. Anyway, so I just thought that was interesting, that this film would have come out after all that. There was something else I wanted to say. Yeah, when Don visits the Mickey's franchise in Colorado, I was surprised to see him order a burger, knowing what he knows, So I thought that was interesting. His meeting with Harry Rydell, played by Bruce Willis, is a great scene, and it's very tense. And you can see that Rydell is a very clever man. He kind of knows the street, he knows people, he knows how to get people to do what he wants. And Don is not used to this type of person. And when Don confronts him about what's going on at the processing plant, Rydell lays down the law to him. He tells him, there's a certain pecking order in this company. You're not aware of it, but I am. And you be advised not to say anything at all. You be advised to keep your mouth shut. And that's what Don does. He finally decides that he has to keep his mouth shut. He can't actually do anything. I think he speaks to his wife on the phone before he checks out. And I don't think we can really hear what she's saying, but he says something like, no, we're not going to move. We're not going to move. So, did she say to him in that phone call, look, this is a job that's bringing in money. It's good money. We have 2 kids. I don't want to have to move again. And if you quit this job, I want a divorce. It's very likely that she's wearing the trousers. And as Southern Nordic said, he's a nice guy, but he does come across as quite spineless in ways. So yeah, that's it, guys. We'll move on to the next pivotal character in this, and that is Amber. She's played by Ashley Johnson, and her mother, Cindy, is played by Patricia Arquette. So Amber, she works in one of these franchises, and she's quite good at her job. The manager is very impressed with her, and he's telling her that if she keeps her nose to the grindstone, she's going to do well. She could become a regional manager and all this. And at the same time, she wants to leave the town and go to university and make something of herself. So she's kind of stuck between 2 possible futures. It's likely that she'll choose university. There are guys in the fast food restaurant, 2 workers, and they're talking a lot about stealing money from the till. They're trying to hatch a plan, and it's very funny. It's kind of the way teenagers would talk and all that. I'll move it on to Brizer here. Brizer, what would you like to say about Amber, Cindy, and we'll definitely get into the uncle as well, who single-handedly saved South Africa from turning into a total basket case of a country, right?
They're interesting characters. She works in one of these fast food joints, and it's a job. I don't think she particularly likes it, but she's doing it because she needs to earn money and all that. And I thought she was a college student. Maybe I'm wrong on that one, but I thought she was just doing this just to get by, and she was certainly studying at home, from what I remember, anyway. And it's helping out with her mother. Obviously a single mother, and so whatever she's earning is helping out with the bills and all the rest of it. And yeah, maybe she's thinking that, you know, you could have a career here, and she does work hard, and she, you know, she gets on pretty well with everybody. And I said the two guys that she works with don't really care too much. They're kind of, say, spitting in the burgers and whatever, and you know, planning, you know, to rob a fast food joint and doing it at a certain time of day, like in the morning when there's nobody around, and they can go in and they can just, because seemingly this has happened before, you know, and they can come in, rob the place, and there's loads of cash in there from the night before. So yeah, and then the mother, obviously, you know, she's obviously not married, and she likes to go out and drink and party, all that, and she's a lot of times she comes home, whatever. I don't know if she even works in this. I'm not sure if she does. Maybe she does. I can't remember that part, but she's always coming home a bit drunk or a bit stoned or whatever, and you know, she doesn't really care about too much what's going on. You know, she's just kind of drifting from day to day. But Amber seems to have a little bit of ambition to kind of improve her life and kind of get out of this little small town she's in, and whether that's kind of moving up within this fast food joint, you know, the actual company itself, or studying in university and doing something else. But you know, we see later on, you know, how she gets involved in activism and all that type of things, which is another very interesting scene there, where she kind of realizes what's going on here, how the cattle are treated, how they're slaughtered, all of that type of thing, and that kind of turns her off the whole thing, and she tends to go another way. And again, of course, her uncle then is a kind of one of these very lefty liberal types, you know, who in some, you know, he talks out of sense sometimes and some things, you know, he calls out the whole world that we're living in, and it's all corporate greed and corporations are kind of taking over. So he's kind of correct on that, but he's kind of looking at very, very much from a lefty kind of activist type of viewpoint. And again, he's the type of guy who just kind of sorry, hold on a second.
I hope I won't get a copyright strike for that little jingle of Brizer.
So where was I there? Yeah. So you see a lot of these type of people around. You know, basically he's a bit of a bum, you know, and he likes again to go out and party and get stoned and all that type of thing. But he stood up against the corporations and all the rest of it. He stood for South Africa against the evil apartheid regime and all that kind of stuff, you know. And so that's how he kind of made a bit of a name for himself. And Amber kind of looks up to him in a way, you know. So yeah, that's all I can kind of recall on that. So if you want, I want to pass it on to Blackbird if he wants to go on further from there.
Oh, great observations. Yeah, Amber, I thought she was in high school preparing to go to college and was starting to hang out with the local college kids. But she reminds me of the person at the job who believes the hype that, you know, you're part of the family, the corporate family here, you know, we all look after each other, etc. And, you know, she still believes this, like Don. It's interesting that, you know, Don, you know, is checking the quality control by eating one of his own burgers that has been spat on and everything else by the disgruntled employees. Whereas the more cynical vice president, Harry Rydell's character, you know, he knows the real story, that, you know, don't be so naive. This is the real world. You know, you have no idea where the real power is, just like Amber has no idea how toxic this restaurant chain is. You know, she just thinks, you know, she's selling hamburgers and, you know, at a good price, and, you know, people enjoy it and it's a good thing. And, you know, she might even have a career as a manager in this because, you know, she's one of those people that shows up, does her shift, doesn't complain, etc. But, you know, after a while, you start to see that something's wrong with the company. And it's when you start seeing that in these type of organizations, that's when they immediately fire you and hire someone else. It's that you are completely, disposable in these corporate settings, and they want people that still believe the lie. And as soon as people get jaded, they get rid of them and then hire somebody new, even if it has to be somebody from other countries coming in as replacement workers. So, that's and the uncle, we'll talk more about him, but the same thing is these modern broken families where the nuclear family is completely broken down. The mom is divorced, mom works at the pet store, goes out and partying, goes an endless series of new guy dates, always talking bad about the father. Amber's father was so bad. And then her uncle, like you said, he was the social justice warrior in college, got kicked out for fighting for South Africa rights, all this. And he is basically, the same thing. He is a divorced father. He has lost custody of his child, and he's basically, working as a cabinet builder for rich carpetbaggers that are coming into the Cody area and buying up farmland and building ranches on it, that they come and visit once a year or something like that, So that's kind of his life. So it's just, showing the breakdown of the nuclear family around this reality of just these small jobs that don't mean anything, that are actually doing more harm than good to the communities, but people keep taking them. There's always another person that'll take that job. This is how desperate the economy is. So anyway, back to you.
Thanks for that, Blackbird. And Southern Nordic.
There's not a whole lot that I can add, I don't think, that hasn't already been said. To me, though, Amber represents the prototypical up-and-coming career woman. She has all of the characteristics. I remember the scene where Amber's mother had been out on a date or something, and she gets home, and Amber is working on a paper, I guess. She's there at the computer just typing away, and her mom comes in there to talk to her, and her mom discovers, she's like, this project you're doing isn't due until next week. And she's like, yeah, I'm just trying to get ahead of it. And she's like, wow, I don't know how you're my daughter, But to me, Amber represents like this sort of, she has this naive idealism. She's very idealistic. And I was going to say, she gets into the environmental activism. She's still in high school, and she really wants to leave her mark on the world. And, it would be interesting, as a side story, to see what happened to Amber, say, once she got into college, once she finished it. Over the years, I've realized that there is a definite sort of, people get into things because they're really idealistic. They have this grand view of what they want to achieve and how they think the world should be. But I think that it's very possible, perhaps not, but it's very possible that later in life, Amber will be sort of grinded down. That's something that Chris Christopherson's character mentions later. You have to learn how to balance idealism with pragmatism. And sometimes it's like you had mentioned a minute ago, I believe it was Betwixt, you said that Harry Rydell's character is very cynical. I could perhaps see Amber as she reaches adulthood and, becomes a young adult. I could see her quite possibly becoming much more cynical about things. But who knows, that's just speculation and conjecture. But I'll hand it back to you, Betwixt.
All right, yeah, I'll take a guess for you, Southern Nordic. I'd say Amber's future. She went to university. She got a degree in gender studies, and she's now back working at Mickey's. That's my guess. Yeah, the uncle. I think you like that one, Southern Nordic. Yeah.
Yeah, That's very possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or she's a barista. She's a 40-year-old barista with 3 different degrees and a master's, and
Still trying to pay off her college debt.
exactly.
The eternal Starbucks barista.
Yeah, she got sucked into the system. But yeah, I think I called the Uncle Jim earlier. His name is Pete, and I found him a very interesting character. He is funny. He's likable in ways, but there's something very much off about him. For example, I think he tries to play Amber off her mother a bit too much, and when they go out for drinks, he offers her, he says he's going to offer her money if she remains sterile, if she doesn't get knocked up. And I just thought that's just weird, an uncle speaking to his niece, on that topic. It just seemed weird. And
yeah, I thought it was strange myself, kind of.
yeah, I know. Obviously, they were drinking and he was joking and all that, but I don't think he was joking when he was saying this to her. He didn't want. He had this idea that he didn't want her to be stuck in that one-horse town. He didn't want her to end up like her mother. He wanted her to get out there and reach her self-actualization or whatever. The activism is interesting. I think Amber she kind of has an epiphany when, she realizes that, things might seem great in theory, but then when you get out there, into the real world and you try and execute those plans, they don't come to fruition. And a good example is the cattle. They try to, they had this wonderful, romantic idea of the cattle being free to roam the Great Plains, and the cattle aren't going to leave their enclosures because that's where they get fed. And I think one of the activists says that maybe the cattle prefer the processed food they get. Maybe it's much more delicious than grass. And I think the cattle really are us. The cattle, we are the cattle who are eating processed foods, and we're not eating natural foods at all. As well as that, Pete, he mentioned South Africa, and he took the moral high ground of his time, and he got kicked out of college for it. But I get the feeling with Pete, he would never check in on how, even let's say 2005, 2006, how South Africa is doing. Is it doing better than it was 20 years ago? I get the feeling he's not that type of guy who will check in on things that he tried to help in the past. So yeah, that's it. One final thing is when Amber, I think her uncle has influenced her a lot during his visit, and she goes to her employer at the Mickey's franchise, and the manager seems like a really nice guy, and he's very friendly. His tone of voice is very calm, and she tells him that she doesn't feel right morally. She doesn't feel right, and he's like, "What are you talking about? You've got a good job here, and if you play your cards right." And as soon as she mentions that she has dreams, as soon as she mentions she has dreams for the future, his face changes, his body language changes. He more or less turns his back on her and says, okay, Amber, don't worry. You'll get your final pay. Don't worry, Amber. And as Blackbird said earlier, these positions are changeable and interchangeable and all the rest. She's just a cog in the machine. So guys, we will move on to the Mexicans. And yeah, as Brizer said at the very start, we see them crossing the border. I think, do you call it a coyote, the person who helps them across the border?
Yes.
You've got this.
Yes, sir.
It is a coyote, yeah. This coyote's doing very well. He speaks English, he speaks Spanish. It's possible he was born in the United States, but his parents were Mexicans, and he's got this great job where he can make a fortune by bringing these migrants into the southern United States. And we have a few different characters. There's Coco, there's Sylvia, and I have to check who the other guy is. What was his name? Raul. Yeah, I should remember that. Played by Wilmer Valderrama. Sylvia is played by Catalina Sandino Moreno. And
I'm sorry. I just had a real quick question. Isn't that the guy that plays Fez in that 70s show, or am I mistaken? I thought he looked familiar. And then you said Valderrama or whatever his last name was.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I checked it up earlier. And
okay, cool.
The character who plays Sylvia, Catalina Sandino Moreno, she was also in some sitcom, I think. She's I think she's Colombian, originally Colombian. Raul is I think he was born in the United States, but his parents were Venezuelan. And the other girl, the one who plays Coco, Ana Claudia Talancon, she's actually Mexican. So there's one Mexican out of that trio. But yeah, they arrive at the food processing plant. They're very happy. At the same time, they're a little bit suspicious about the whole thing because using an expression that Blackbird used when we discussed They Live, you've got a lot of Judas goats around, and they're trying to take advantage of these newbies. You've got a very aggressive supervisor. I think, what is his name? Is it Tony or something? Mike. Yeah. That's it. Big Mike. Yeah, Big Mike.
Real sleaze bag.
Yeah. Very macho. Sleeps with all the women.
Gets them hooked on meth and drugs and
as well. Yeah. Makes them pliable. And threatens them. He threatens them with all this sort of legal stuff as well. We could say you're illegal and get you kicked out. If you don't pull up your socks. So yeah, it's a very, very. I have to say the scenes with the Mexicans are very good. There is an interesting story there, and I'll bring in Brizer to add his 2 cents on it, and the rest of the lads, and then we then sum up the film, and we might go down different avenues. It'll be quite flexible towards the end. So Brizer, work away there.
Yeah, are we going to talk about the Harry Rydell character more, or have we finished with him, or are we going to come back to him, or what? Because there's some interesting things that he.
I'll tell you what. Go ahead and talk about him, and then if you like, I talk about the Mexicans.
I found that scene pretty good, and it was typical like Bruce Willis. Like he tends to play that kind of deadpan, but cynical character. And he's just sitting there eating the burger, stuffing his face with the burgers, and it's great, and then Don pulls him up on there's shit in the burgers, all right? And he says, well. One good quote he came out with, which I kind of liked, he says, "It's a sad fact of life, Don, but the truth is we all have to eat a little shit from time to time, And I think as well, he's one of these guys who basically doesn't take any shit from anybody, He's one of the top brass in the company, and he does things his way, and. Yeah, it is disturbing to know that, there could be shit in these burgers, right? But I think this will happen anyway in any kind of abattoir, that fecal matter will get into the meat. Of course, if there's a lot of it there, absolutely, it'll cause problems and people will get sick from it. But I think a little bit here and there, I don't think it's going to really harm anybody too much, because, the enzymes and the bacteria in your stomach can kind of kill all that stuff anyway. So it's not something to be really afraid of too much. If you look at vegetables and crops and everything, people use manure to grow them, and that's basically shit, right? And it's very one of the best fertilizers out there, And then the whole thing is then, well, how do we get this fecal matter out of the meat? Well, they use, let's sterilize it, but that's using chemicals, which is actually worse again, And that's what you're seeing now. They're introducing all these through this health and safety. Sort of Nordic brought it up there, where it's chemicals and gas and all these different things that are used in the process now, which is not good, and it totally depletes any nutritional value in the meat. So you're basically eating crap, which will fill you up for an hour or two, and then you're hungry again, and all it'll do is make you fat, So and very unhealthy. So I kind of liked his character, the way he came across that way. Yeah, he's very cynical, and he doesn't really care as long as the burgers are selling, and they are selling. And he's not too concerned about like what Don, Don went to investigate this, and he's very concerned. And Harry doesn't seem to care a lot, people will eat it, the cooking process, he says, will kill it all, kill all the bad bacteria or whatever's in there. So what's there to worry about? And it's that kind of corporate mindset, yeah, we'll have health and safety regulations in there, but let's keep those burgers, keep those burgers flipping, sell them out, the guy slops, sell it out there to the people. They're not going to notice because all they want is their burger and fries, So kind of very interesting character there. So going on then to, again, going back to the Uncle Pete, I don't know if you guys noticed that the relationship between him and Amber and the mother, came across to me as quite incestuous. I don't know if that came across to you guys.
Yes.
But
I got that feeling as well.
Because I was expecting are the three of them all going to end up in bed together or something? It was very touchy feely. There was a lot of that going on. So but that's a typical type of kind of guy he is. I think he'll flirt with all the young girls and all the rest of it, and if he's lucky, he'll get laid, and he'll do it, no problem. And then he'll also go for the older women too if they're up for it. So he in his younger days, he was active against all the the things that were going on back then, like the whole South Africa thing and all that. And as you said, betwixt, does he care about South Africa now? What's going on there now? He doesn't. He hasn't a clue what's going on there now. But he fought for what he thought was the right thing back in the day, and I'm sure he'd be doing the same thing now, looking at what we're seeing now going on. The whole racism and all this thing going on, and the misogyny and homophobia and all that kind of stuff. He'd be exactly on board with all of that, And you see that a lot with these lefty libtards. They do come out with some interesting things. But they're completely misguided and misdirected in what they're looking at. And they just jump on board a narrative because it feels good. It's virtue signaling at its best, So then going on to the Mexicans, yeah, that's interesting to watch them working in the factory and trying to do a good job and whatever. And you said that you've got that the superior, the guy who's in charge there, Mike, who's a bit of a nasty character. He's he's coming up behind the women and he's pinching them on the butt and all the rest of it, and he's flirting with them big time, and he's having sex with them whenever he can in the back of his truck. And as I say, that's how he gets them on his side, and if they start playing up or asking too many questions, he threatens them with, I'll call the immigration people and you're on the next plane home to Mexico or wherever you come from. And I think it's Raul. He becomes a cleaner, and doesn't he get involved? He kind of sees like the what it's really like in there. He has to go in with the high pressure kind of hose, cleaning out all the blood from the walls and cleaning off all the guts. I mean, there's a lot of kind of gory scenes in this as well, which would actually kind of put you off eating meat in a way, like it's not a very I think working in an abattoir or somewhere like that you'd have to have a pretty strong stomach to work in a place like that. But for them, it's a job. We came all the way from Mexico to get this, so we'll work hard and we'll share a little house together and we'll send whatever money back to our families and stuff like that. But you can see how they're being used by this whole thing. And if, what I would say to a lot of Mexicans, a lot of immigrants, if I was to meet them, you'd be better off staying in your own country, because if you came over here and be used in these places like this and treated like dirt and being threatened, threats hanging over you all the time, is that a life that you want to lead? Is that why you travel thousands of miles to come here to work in a crappy place like this? Surely you would be better off at home and trying to build up your own country and make something good of yourselves there, instead of coming over to our places, because it's not a nice environment, and there's a lot of exploitation, a lot of that going on. So yeah, that's all I have at the moment, because as I said, there's lots of different things, and I'm trying to remember all the different characters. So I'll hand it back to you, Betwixt, and on to Blackbird then.
All right, cheers for that, Brizer. Blackbird, go ahead.
Great observations. And one of the things that really struck me as someone who grew up on a beef farm here in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina, and this was family farm, multi-generational, trace lineage back to colonial times, right? And so this idea of the traditional independent Jeffersonian farm, the family farm where you raise X number of head of cattle, X number of goats, X number of sheep, X number of chickens, etc. And it's basically to feed your family and to have whatever surplus to sell, and basically to make enough money to pay for the property tax of the farm, right? And it was during World War II that basically the Henry Ford model of industrialization moved into the farm, and you started seeing this idea of the modern food processing plants and high density farming. For us, my grandparents, for example, raised some of the first chicken houses, high density chicken houses, the poultry industry here in Wilkes County, starting in the Depression. Those were because my grandfather and my Uncle Dewey had gone to Detroit to work in the car and tractor and truck industry. They built tractors and trucks more than cars, and then they brought that mindset back to Wilkes and used their money they saved to put in some of the first high density chicken farms. And we never did the high density cattle lot thing, but I remember in the 90s, I was driving across Texas, and about 100 miles literally from this lot farm that was just right by the railroad tracks, right by the highway, out in the middle of nowhere, it was just this high density cattle lot where they would basically bring the cattle in, feed them, synthetic food, had a deep well for the water, and then put them on the train to the abattoir, the processing plant. And just the stink of that, will stay with me forever. As the closest you got to this place, it was just unbearable how bad it smelled. And we had between 30 and 50 head of cattle at a time, and our farm did not stink. The chicken houses did not stink. That was the thing about this high density problem is now you've got a lot of waste to deal with, and so it's just those kind of images. And then the other aspect of this is who owns those processing plants that sets the tone of just being this intransigent monster. And, in the movie, it's the Uniglobe meat packing processing company. And the thing not said is many of these meat processing plants have been bought up, especially in the last 20 to 30 years, by Jewish interests. And they come in and they make them kosher, and then they fire all the local people and they replace them with illegals or non-whites. And one of the things that happened here in Wilkes County was we had a premier industry called Holly Farms, started by a guy named Charles Fred Lovett in 1944. And my grandparents used to actually raise chickens for Holly Farms. And it was this model of the efficiency, modern sanitation techniques. It was written up worldwide of this is the way to do this modern type of farming. But then in the late, let's see here, in 1989, 89, Tyson, which is one of the most ruthless companies ever to exist, that make this Uniglobe meatpacking processing in the film look like Girl Scouts. I mean, Tyson is known for being just completely cutthroat. They came in and basically forced Holly Farms to accept their offer of $1.4 billion. They took over and just changed the entire county. Suddenly, you did not have locals at any part of the equation. They bought up land, put in their own chicken houses, brought in tons of illegal Mexicans and Arabs and everything else to run the plant, and it's all outside interest. And that section of town now that used to be this model of this, modern processing plant is now a complete slum area that stinks all the time, right? So, just this really hits home to me as, how these processing plants have been weaponized against the local populations to bring in these replacement workers that are illegal. And so one of the things about when the Mexicans finally get here and there's this network put in place where, okay, we'll get you jobs, we'll get you welfare. You got all these NGOs here in North Carolina that just are, setting these people up, and the local people can't get jobs. This is the nature of it. And I love the scene where they're bringing in the illegals late at night, and the Spanish-speaking guard at the gate is just waving them through. They're working the late night shift illegally and just being waved through. So I found that very interesting. But so I'll send it back to you. Those are just some of my observations.
Thanks, Blackbird. And Southern Nordic, yeah.
This is the part of the film that I absolutely fixated on. I have me and Blackbird. We're actually, where I'm from is not too far at all from where he lives. I have seen firsthand the importation of labor from Central America, from Mexico, especially in northwest North Carolina. I was raised in the northeast corner of Tennessee, and I really relate to what you were saying, Blackbird, about the family farm, because I was pretty well raised on a family farm as well. My great grandfather's place. He would have, like you had said, 30, 50 head of cattle. He grew tobacco. He did a lot of different things, but it was never, this high density stuff. And one of the things I always notice is that Northeast Tennessee is much poorer than Northwest North Carolina. There's a lot more tourism over there. And it's really fascinating. I grew up on the Carter County, Avery County, in Tennessee and North Carolina, respectively. I grew up just a mile from the state line there. So I was in North Carolina a lot, and I always noticed there was always so many more Mexicans up there. So many more. Because you have, Christmas tree farming. I've worked in Christmas trees myself before, cutting them down, dragging them up or down hills, baling them, and then we'd always take them down to Asheville, North Carolina, and sell them. But they're the larger farms that have came in, they employ just about purely Mexican labor. This is what I fixated on, though. I'm going to make a bold statement here. And it's something that I've came to believe the last year or so. I believe that capitalism is actually the greatest threat to our people and its future. Capitalism is the great miscegenator, is what I call it. I don't see it so much as communism anymore, which, of course, I'm not sitting here and, carrying water for communism. I don't like it. But I will say this, these corporations, them bringing in all these Mexicans. It is really, it's killing us, you know. People intermix with each other. This has gone on throughout history, I believe all the way back to the Roman Republic. But here in modern day America, this monstrous system has been perfected. I have several examples here. I figure maybe we can get into them later. But, you know, it's basically slave labor. We see it today. I mean, look at all the immigrants that are hell, I'm not calling immigrants. What the hell's that? These are invaders. This is a full-scale invasion, and it's aided and abetted by our very own government. You know, this is so much labor for the massive corporations. I really, you know, it really gets my blood boiling if you think about it. It's like Blackbird said, the locals are repeatedly getting abused, rejected, thrown to the wolves, basically. There's a whole lot I could say about this. I actually get fairly worked up about this. You know, I'm actually looking into studying some of the things that's why I opened my part of this stream with that quote from Jack London. I'm actually, in a way, a leftist when it comes to labor, you could say. But I don't care for all the social and cultural. And I will say this, I think the labor movement was extremely co-opted over, let's say, the 20th century. You know, they took on, it was extremely racial at first. I have numerous examples here I have written down. It really just goes to show that I believe capitalism, this unbridled corporate capitalism, is the biggest threat to our people. I actually felt sympathy, you know, a lot of sympathy for Coco, Sylvia, and Raul. You're coming all this way, and you're kind of promised this glorious life. You know, it's going to be so much better than your native land of Mexico. You may have, you know, more comfort to a degree, but really, I think you're sacrificing your soul for this sort of comfort. And it's just grinding everything down. You know, what the character Rudy said, he said that modern day America was a machine, and it is just consuming all. It's grinding everything down. It's grinding our individual ethnic differences. It's grinding those down. It wants to create this sort of one-size-fits-all, standardized sort of just cultural and ethnic amalgamation. That's really what I see it as. Yeah, you know, it just shows, you know, that they are pawns to the system. They're just a different flavor of cattle than, say, us white Americans are, that are in the lower classes, the working class or the middle class. But yeah, that's really about all I can think of to say right this second. I'll hand it back to you, Betwixt.
Thanks for that, Southern Nordic, and I agree. I think, you know, we all inverted quotes here, benefit to some degree from capitalism. We're all in it, we're all part of it. But I do concur that it is the biggest enemy to our people. And I would say to all the peoples of the world, because it doesn't really differentiate. It's all, as you say, about grinding everyone down, cookie cutter society. But yeah, I'll just say a few things about the Mexicans. There's a good scene where Raul he's, you know, hosing down some equipment outside in the yard, and there's another Mexican with him. And the other Mexican is, you know, he's saying something like, "Hey man, you don't have a bank account, but you know what, man, I've got a bank account. Hey, Ese, leave your money in my bank account. What do you think?" You know, which sounds really fucking dodgy, I have to say. Another thing is, yeah, while they're hosing down the machinery, the equipment, you suddenly see a number of rats And that's something, that we don't think about. Wherever there's, a large quantity of meat, you're going to have rats. And it's kind of like nature is there in all its brutality on the outskirts of this system, and it's waiting for its chance to take over humanity, civilization. This is part of civilization, even though a slaughterhouse is barbaric in so many ways. I wanted to say as well that Sylvia, she doesn't like how Coco, her sister, has changed since they've arrived in America. Coco has started doing drugs. I think Sylvia calls her a puta, a prostitute, something like that. And Coco is very angry, and they have some sort of falling out. And Sylvia says, I think she says, our father would be ashamed if he saw you now. So Sylvia represents, the traditional Mexican girl in some small little town somewhere slap bang in the middle of Mexico. And Coco has been Americanized. She's going to embrace whatever this new country can offer her. And in this case, it's money, drugs, and sex.
Hey, I just wanted to interject something really quick too. I have heard and I've read before, a lot of these immigrants, I should say, that come over into America, that's a really good juxtaposition you had made there. And I also got that feeling in the relationship between Sylvia and her sister Coco. One of the things that I have read, some of these families that come over, they reproduce like rabbits. They have tons of children. But given a generation or two, their children, or grandchildren, I should say, they're not having children like their grandparents did. So, the Americanization sort of rubs off on them. And I think that's a part of why they just want to keep pumping this country full of all of these third worlders. They're like, well, say a generation or two ago, we had people from this nation, this third world nation, whether they be Arab or Middle Eastern or, Central American, they actually realize, they're like, hey, they've become thoroughly Americanized. They're not having the number of children. So we just want to keep throwing more blood into the pot, basically. I just wanted to interject that real quick. The Americanization is all pervasive.
Absolutely. And it seems that, once they can get at the second generation with their propaganda, they convince them to be a consumer and not a parent. So as the generations progress, they just becomes a corporate nunnery. That's the way I put it. Like, girls generally, they're filled with ambition, and they decide to put having kids on the long fingers. Some of them never even consider it at all. They want to be immersed in the century of the self, or the century of the selfie on Instagram. But yeah, I'll just say, Sylvia, she doesn't have the stomach for the slaughterhouse, and she goes off to work as a cleaner in a hotel. But then her husband, because they are actually married, Raul, he tries to save a fellow worker whose legs get mangled in a machine, and he falls flat on his back on some sort of conveyor belt, and he's in a very bad way. He's going to be out of action for a long time. It could be forever in a way, because he really had a bad fall, and he's just he can't work anymore. He's lying on his back, and the company, they do a blood test on him, and they find meth in his system, something like that. So he's not going to get any sort of compensation. And now Sylvia's job at the hotel is not going to bring in enough money for two people. She has to be the breadwinner, and therefore she has to go to where the money is, and that's the meat processing plant. But Big Mike, he's the guardian. He's the guy who will get you in, if you play by his rules. He tells her, I'm sorry, just aren't any jobs, no jobs at the moment. I'm very sorry. And he kind of leaves it hanging there, unless, and then we see them, fucking in the back of his car. And she mustn't have impressed him enough, because he gives her the worst job in the plant. She's actually on the killing floor. And that is the final scene of the movie, where she's got all her gloves on, she's got her mask on. You know, she can barely breathe. You can see like her heart must be thumping like crazy. And at the same time, we see the cattle coming in, and their eyes, their nervous eyes, because they're being kind of herded into this confined space, a very noisy environment. And it's as if the cattle know that the Grim Reaper is around the corner. It's as if they know, their instinct has kicked in. I should say, yeah, because Southern Nordic mentioned, you know, the whole hardcore capitalist system. Like, I worked in a food processing plant for a few summers, and I remember, you know, you're working on the line. You could be anywhere along that line. You might be moved to a different part later in the day. You might be on the same part of the line all day. And if that line stopped when it wasn't meant to stop, there was hell to pay. There was absolute hell to pay. The supervisor would appear, and she looked like Maggie Thatcher. I remember she had a clipboard and a pen, and she'd be roaring, you know, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And then you'd have people saying, "We're out of such and such," or "We're out of such and such," or "Someone hasn't done this." And it was, you know, there'd be a game of accusations, and then the person, you'd find out who or which was the human cog that had malfunctioned. And that person would be given a right bollocking, and then slowly but surely the line would start up again. When someone important was coming to the factory, there was a cleaning. A very deep clean was done. Everything was polished to a shine. And when I watched the film, I was thinking of when Don went to that abattoir. You know, he got the guided tour. He didn't get to see the, you know, it's amazing. You think that he would have, it just shows how dim-witted he was. You'd think he would say, right, I want to see where the cattle are slaughtered, or, you know, but he didn't go in there at all. He was probably in the canteen all that time, you know, being served donuts and coffee, and just looking around and saying, wow, the tables in here are very clean. Right, Brizer, is there anything else you'd like to add about the Mexicans, and also anything else you'd like to say about the film?
Yeah, well, I think Southern Nordic brought up some very good points there about the Mexicans working there, you know, and how they're being exploited. And you can see that what's going on now, you know, because if you look at all the service industries here, I've seen it here in Ireland, like it's pretty much, we've caught up with America in many ways. You know, all the fast food joints, the Starbucks, the coffee shops, everything. There's hardly any Irish people working in them. There's a few, but very few. And I'm sure they're being exploited. A lot of them, from what I know, are living 12 to a house, okay? And just about managing to pay the exorbitant rent, okay? And then trying to whatever they can to send any money back to their families or whatever. I'm wondering how long that's going to kind of, when it's going to kick in to say, you know, guys, this isn't really working here. We were promised to, you know, these streets are paved with gold and everything's going to be magnificent and we're going to make loads of money and we're going to get all these gadgets and things and it's all going to be wonderful, but it's not working out that way. And, you know, as Blackbird alluded to when he was growing up in the farms, you know, I remember myself, even though I was brought up in the city, on my mother's side, there were a lot of farmers, and I used to go and work on those farms during the summer. And I had a great time out in the open air, you know, small farms like, say, 200-acre farms, 150, 200-acre farms. There was a couple of hundred cattle, maybe some sheep or some pigs or whatever, and chickens. And all the food was fresh, and it was a much nicer, cleaner environment. And even though hygiene wasn't maybe at the highest of standards, you were never going to get sick. And it was a nice time then, you know, and to see the way the corporations have moved in on that, and particularly food, they've literally destroyed it and turned it into absolute goy slop. And that's what's happened. And as I said, capitalism is indeed, I think, the root cause of a lot of the problems that we have right now. And what it actually is now is a merger between between the two, between capitalism and communism, which is now called communitarianism, which is a merger of the two, where you see the social justice warriors are being funded by big capital. So, you know, the whole concept of the free market is gone, you know. It's all about the profit, the bottom line, you know, who's going to get there first, competition, cutting each other's throats, you know, all these backroom deals going on and mergers and stuff like that. And it's a very nasty kind of world. This is it's ruthless. There's no empathy there. There's nothing. It's just get people in. You know, we don't call them employees anymore. Or, you know, I remember working in a company and we had a personnel department. Now it's called human resources. Like, we're resources now. And that's how people are treated. It's like a conveyor belt. Just get people in, do their job, and if they step out of line, well, we'll fire them and we'll get somebody else in. And that's the world that we're living in, and that's what showed here and in this movie about these migrants who are coming in, thinking that life is going to get so much better. It's not. It's gotten worse. They'd be better off on their own little farm in Mexico or Colombia or wherever they came from, and just trying to do their own thing and take responsibility for their lives, and, you know, instead of expecting Whitey to step in and give them a better life, because it isn't happening, you know. So what else? There was another part, or something came to my mind there, or something else that in the movie, but it's kind of slipped my mind. It might come back to me, but. Yeah, and then the whole idea of, you know, when Raul had or his friend had the accident in the machine and half his leg came off and whatever. And again, it just shows you, like, if an accident happens to you, like, you're completely that's it basically. You can't work, so now you're useless and you're stuck now in a foreign country. You can't get home. What do you do? Yeah, it's a nasty world, and for some, I don't know why a lot of these migrants from all these third world countries want to come to our countries. Like, we have our own issues, but we can deal with them ourselves. Bringing them in, now we got to take care of these people, and you have these people who will exploit the situation. As I've said before in previous shows, there's a hotel in my town where there's about 70 Afghans living in them. The guy who's running the hotel made 2.5 million profit last year, right? These are the guys who are waving, you know, oh, we want, migration's good for the country. We you know, these guys are pure. All these guys are thinking about is shekels, nothing else. They don't care about these people. That's all they're concerned about, is shekels. And the sooner the better these migrants wake up to this and realize that life is better off back in your home country, where you belong, among your own people, and doing your own thing, because there's nothing here for them. And, you know, we're struggling ourselves trying to make our countries better as it is. But we've got a lot of corrupt politicians who are, again, looking out for themselves. It's all greed. It's all selfishness. It's not a great place, this world, at this moment in time, that's for sure. So yeah, I'll pass back then now to you, Betwixt.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brizer. I was just thinking there, you know, if KFC, you know, if they could control the demographics of a nation based on race, you know, imagine that, a company being able to change the blood of a nation. And that's where we are. That's where we're at. Pass it on to Blackbird.
Oh, great points. And yeah, just briefly, the scene with Raul's friend falling into the machine and getting his legs mangled, Raul trying to save him and falling and getting hurt and becoming disabled. And when you see the scene at the hospital where the human resource department people with the interpreter come in and confront Sylvia about her husband. And you really see how Machiavellian this company is, and the illusions that Harry Rydell's character was alluding to, and Rudy Martin. Just you can't fathom how ruthless these people and how powerful they are. Every time somebody tries to go up against them, they get destroyed. You can't beat these people. They're the mob, basically. This is what they are. And so you have this human resource person confronting Sylvia. And at first we're so sorry about what happened, but our test revealed that your husband was doing drugs and was most likely responsible for this. So you need to cease and desist any, possibility of, seeking compensation on this, or else we'll, have to deport you and everything else. Just that, that velvet glove over the steel fist of absolute power. It's like, we're going to pretend like we care about you, but we have just completely screwed you over, and there's nothing you can do about it because we have so much power. We rigged the test. We control everything here. We don't tolerate anybody messing with our bottom line. And the other aspect was, you talk about whatever you do, you don't stop the assembly line. Stopping the assembly line is the big no-no, and whoever was responsible will be made an example of. And so that's just such a powerful scene of the assembly line. In corporate systems like this, you have what's called production. It's like, you start out at this, and once you get trained and then you make production numbers, then you'll make this much money. But the trick there is it's like the hamster on the spinning wheel. As soon as you make production, they raise the production number. So now you have to work even harder and faster, harder, faster, stronger, like the old song from Daft Punk. And I guess the thing that bothered me was the trying to make the kill zone so horrific. And, it is horrible that, this is the nature's, what is it? I'm trying to remember. Joseph Campbell, his famous line about, this is disgust for vegetarians. He says, on this planet, one thing eats another. That's just the way it is. If you don't like that reality, go to some other planet, right? And so this reality of, you hate to kill other things because we've been programmed that killing is wrong, but at the same time, the reality is you have to eat. And so the question is, how humanely can you kill an animal? And one of the things about the National Socialist Germany, they were the first ones to pass humane slaughter laws in these new modern processing plants. And this idea of you humanely kill the cattle, you don't torture them in any way. And this is completely different than the Jewish and Arab way of slaughtering cattle with kosher and halal practices, which are completely unsanitary. And one of the things, in my experience, is talking to the health inspectors here about changes since Holly Farms sold to Tyson, and Holly Farms just always did compassionate slaughter on the chickens, etc. But when Tyson bought it, they put in a whole new section to tap into that lucrative kosher and halal slaughter. And so you had these kill rooms with these rabbis and these, clerks or clerics or whatever coming in and doing these barbaric bleed out slaughters that are completely unsanitary. But the local inspectors are at a loss because they know that if they try to shut it down, Tyson will come at them just like this human resource group, that suddenly that health inspector won't have a job anymore, right? So you can't talk about it now because the company has so much power, and they wrap it in this religious thing, but it's completely horrific and completely unsanitary. But that's what they have here in the Appalachian. I still cannot believe that Wilkes County allows kosher and halal slaughter to be, it's basically, ritual murder of, ritual sacrifice of the animals. It's like chicken swinging, and that they allow it under the ideas of tolerance or whatever in global markets, whatever they want to call it. But that's the reality. But as a person who grew up on a farm and can kill and dress anything from a fish to a chicken to a beef to a deer, slaughter is messy business, but you don't have to be sadistic about it and you don't have to be unsanitary about it. But when you have mass farming like these assembly lines, it's a messy business. And so it's like, is this kind of large scale production really what we want to be? Or what I'm seeing is a return to small abattoirs, like the people we get our meat from. It's like, we know the farmer, we know the abattoir they use. They take it, they kill it humanely, they dress it very sanitary, they pack it, freeze it, and I just go pick up the boxes of meat, and I know what it was fed, and I know where it came from. Unlike anything in these so-called supermarkets, you have no idea, and they pass all these laws that say we don't have to tell you where the meat comes from anymore. Trust us, right? So anyways, those are just some of my observations on that scene. So back to you.
I was just thinking of honey. When you buy honey, it says, for example, Spanish honey. And then I look at the back of it and it says honey from, Turkey, Ukraine, Italy, and Spain. So maybe there's like a 1%, 1% of it is from Spain, but they say Spanish honey. All right, so Nordic.
There's not. I'm glad that Blackbird said his piece there. That was pretty well what I was going to say. I've also, I'm into fishing. I like to fish a lot. Sometimes I keep my catch, but a lot of times I just practice catch and release. I'm not super crazy over fish. I've done a good bit of deer hunting when I was younger. There's a humane way to kill an animal. You minimize the suffering as much as you can. I'm glad that Blackbird brought up about like the halal and just this assembly line sort of ritualistic murder. I could not work at a slaughterhouse. I'll just tell you that now. But I don't really have the stomach for it. When you slaughter a domesticated animal that you've raised yourself, you know that you've worked in your life to provide that animal a good, clean, healthy life, and you try to minimize the suffering. There's not much more I could add about the movie. I do have some stuff written here about, what I fixated on from the movie about, the capitalist importation of labor. But this movie, like I said, it left quite the impression on me. It really just goes to show the sort of hollowness and just how modern day postmodern America is really a sort of, it's just a machine. It's really a sort of maelstrom, something akin to, Charybdis out of the Odyssey. It just takes everything in. I had a few examples of, the capitalist system. Did you want me to go over that real quick betwixt? It'll just take me a couple of minutes.
Yeah, go ahead. Take your time. I'm okay for time. Go ahead.
Let's see. This was the direction. Like, I did some research, and like I said, I've been looking into this for about 2 years now. I have always admired Tom Metzger. He was an advocate for the white working class. And he had a show called Race and Reason. He had a man on who was one of the editors for his newsletter. His name was John Jewell. That's why I posted that video on Odyssey betwixt, because that video, when I first seen it 2 years ago, it really spoke to me in a way. You know, my ancestry here in Appalachia, it is largely English and Ulster Scot. You go back several generations, I've got some Norman French and a little bit of Danish. But, you know, I've noticed this, and maybe Blackbird9, maybe he could agree with me on this. Us heritage Appalachians, we have a sort of anarchist, we have anarchism, I believe, in our blood. And this is because on my Ulster Scot branch of the family, I would not be surprised in the least if some of my ancestors came over from the plantation of Ulster. I wouldn't be surprised if they came over as indentured servants. You see, the Anglo elite, at first they wanted to bring indentured servants over here and use them as slave labor for about 5 to 7 years. That is a big reason I believe the Ulster Scots and some of the other poor whites, they wanted to get away from the East Coast, from the Piedmont regions. Once they did their indentured servitude, a lot of times they would just run away. They wanted to go to the western frontier up in the Appalachian Mountains. That is one of the reasons I think we have, and I'm no different myself. You know, some people, I just view ideology as a tool. I don't really confine myself to these various labels like some proclaim that they're in National Socialist or this. Honestly, I find the idea of national anarchism to be appealing, the works of Keith Preston and Troy Southgate, but there's so many examples throughout history. And there was a video, I'll start at the beginning. My first example, there was a guy named Uber Boyo. He has a great YouTube channel. He's a fellow Irishman, by the way. I'm sure y'all have heard of him. He made a video and posted it last week that was talking about, you know, how the Roman Republic and Roman Empire was not so Roman when Rome fell. You know, they imported all of this labor, slaves from, say, the Near East, Africa, perhaps Gaul, parts of maybe Northern Europe, everywhere. This started in the Roman Republic because the senators and you know, they were not paid originally when they were in the Senate. So they would have, say, these large estates, these large farms. They would import slave labor to manage it. And eventually, slaves would oftentimes be given freedom. We see this, fast forward a couple thousand years or so, we see this, the Anglo-Jewish planter class of the South, of the Confederacy, did this to the poor white Southern farmers, importing all of these African slaves. You know, the Anglo-Jewish elite who had, Jews were very prominent in the sugar plantations. Once again, the poor white Southern farmer, out of work, out of luck. Fast forward to the Coal Wars in Appalachia, up in, say, West Virginia, the Battle of Blair Mountain, Eastern Kentucky, Matewan, all these things. The coal miners, local coal miners, heritage Appalachians, they want to unionize. What does the coal companies and the Pinkertons and the Baldwin Felts agents do? They import scab black laborers from Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. They would be employed, and this caused racial strife. Another example is the San Francisco riots of 1877. That's one of the things that I really admire about the Ulster Scots and also the Irish. They don't take shit from people. That's sadly one of the things I think that's been dulled by in white Americans. You know, we're patient. We take shit. I've noticed the Celtic blood is much more emotional, much more quick to anger. The Germanic blood is more, it's got its own great traits, of course, but it seems like they also put too much stock into the system themselves. The San Francisco riots, dock workers, mainly Irish, they chimped out in the summer of 1877 against the Chinese immigrants. They burnt down the Chinese quarter of San Francisco. You see this sort of labor struggle. It's been going on. Our capitalist elite, both white, say Anglo, and Jewish, they have used other races against the middle and working class in this country for centuries. And the last example I have, I was reading about the Hawaiian sugar plantations at the turn of the 20th century. These were owned by wealthy Anglo and Jewish interests. early on in the sugar plantations, they were largely, I believe it said they were 90%, the labor was 90% Japanese. And the Japanese had to deal with horrible, working conditions, low pay. And, the Japanese race in their own right, they're quite an intelligent people. They got the idea they wanted to start to unionize back in, say, the 19-teens, 1920s. What did these wealthy Anglo and Jewish interests controlling these plantations, what did they do? They shut down production for a period of time, and they got rid of most of the Japanese workers. And what did they do? They brought in Filipino, Puerto Rican. It's hard to unionize if you can't communicate with the worker next to you. That's one of the reasons why the early labor movement was extremely racial. It's hard to organize, and that's something that the capitalists have always realized. But that's really one of the unspoken histories. And sadly, one of the only ways you can get this history is by going through the anti-racist bullshit. They're the only people that talk about this. Modern day leftists, they claim, Matewan and the Blair Mountain struggle, that was our people. They were anti-racist. That's complete total bullshit. They try to claim it as their own. A podcast called The Trillbillies, which rakes in $22,000 a month. Very disgusting people based up in Whitesburg, Kentucky. They try to claim this as their own while, they try to gloss over. It's hard to find this information. You have to wade through a lot of shit to get to it, but it's actually quite rewarding. But anyways, that's about all I have. I feel like I've hogged the last 5 minutes. Y'all go ahead.
Thanks very much, Southern Nordic. You've done your homework, definitely. I think there is a song, an Irish folk song called the Molly Maguires. I don't know if you've heard of them. I think they had some sort of labor.
I've heard of them, yeah.
It was a secret society. It was a secret society, Irish secret society that led the labor revolt up in Pennsylvania. Very fascinating.
Was that to do with the railroads, or was it the mines?
It was both, I believe. Both railroads and mines.
Right. So I'll just go through my notes, and then I'll leave it to you guys to give your final thoughts and maybe give the movie a rating out of 10. I'll get back to what Blackbird said about, when HR meet Sylvia, and you've got the man and you've got the interpreter. And the man, you can see that he wants this to be as quick a meeting as possible. He doesn't want to dally. He's expecting her to push back a bit, but at the end of the day, he wants to go on his coffee break, or he wants to get back and, do stuff on his computer. And she doesn't believe their story. And every time she says, I don't believe it, the man says, well, we've got the report, so it's kind of like, we have the evidence, we have the graph that proves Raoul had drugs in his system. Another thing I should say is that, just overall, this film, it came into my head a few weeks ago, and I hadn't thought about it in a while. Now, when I watched this back in 2007, I was thinking about this for a few days. I was mulling over it. And when I spoke to Southern Nordic last week, he had just watched it for the first time, and I felt like saying to him, get yourself a stiff drink and sit down. In the case of Blackbird, he only watched it a few hours ago, so he's probably not going to sleep tonight. Brizer, I'm sure, will be mulling over it as well. But this film seemed to go down the memory hole. It came out in 2006. And as I said at the very start, I never hear anyone talking about this, referencing this film in any way. Around that time, you had that film Super Size Me, which was condemning the likes of McDonald's. This guy, he ate fast food for a month or something. He wanted to see the effects it would have on his body, which were not very positive. And there was a lot. You had a lot of, we call them lefties, the lefties back then. And they were against this. They were against, the idea of slaughterhouses. They were against the idea of these fast food restaurants serving absolute crap to the customers. And then something changed. It all seemed to disappear. Now, it probably disappeared, because of some very influential business people who happened to, have investments in the fast food industry. It all seemed to disappear. There was no more about it. No more about fast food and nutritional value. And, oh, sure, look, here's a salad, here's a salad. We have a salad on our menu. Yeah, so it seems like these people were, I would say, these lefties, some of them, they were bought off with money. Some of them were bought off with identity politics. They seemed to go that way. And there was no more mention of, the 1% and all this. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about that. Yeah, this comes at a time now when every so often I see on Twitter someone has posted an article on mainstream media, and they're saying, is being fit and healthy, is it white supremacism? It's like, is going to the gym white supremacism? And there is a narrative now being pushed out there that, looking after your body, maybe trying to cut down your calories is, good old-fashioned Nazism. So, and, this also comes at a time when we've got that thing, I forget her name, the obese black woman who, she played a flute that hadn't been played in a few centuries or something. I can't remember her name. Anyway, big and beautiful. You've got this thing, big and beautiful, is it? Which makes sense for these corporations. They want people to be obese. They want people to be addicted to this food. We don't know what's put into the food. In this movie, the guy gets no compensation because he allegedly had drugs in his system. We don't know what drugs are being put into these foods. They seem to be very, very addictive for a lot of people. They can't get off them. Blackbird recommended a podcast of his, and I listened to the second hour of it, and that's where he goes through the whole history of food and processed foods and all that. And I thought it was very, very good. And he mentions in it the idea of boxes of cereals. And, they put a plastic toy in the middle of the cereal in the box. And kids then, they want that toy. Then there's the thing about fast food, and you get a Happy Meal. Maybe the kid gets a toy with the Happy Meal. How can mum at home in the kitchen compete with a corporation that can hand out toys with every meal? It was a very, very good listen, and I do recommend people check it out. Yeah, Southern Nordic, he was on about capitalism. I'm getting back to this as well, and I think I absolutely loathe communism. I despise it with every fiber of my being. I also have come to really despise capitalism. And, growing up, we were more or less put into one category or the other. You either support capitalism and freedom and, celebrations and whatever, or you support, communism, which is just an ideology that leads nowhere and kills millions of people in the process. But, what's capitalism doing? If they're serving guy slop, and the cancer rate, for example, is 5 times what it was 50 years ago. Surely capitalism is killing as many people as communism has killed. I think of an airport when I think of capitalism, and that is, these days, the only time I ever eat a hamburger from a McDonald's or Burger King is when I'm in an airport and I haven't brought food with me, and I end up having to get something, and the easy option in the airport, well, you don't have many options, is to buy an overpriced Whopper meal or Big Mac meal or whatever. And I think the airport epitomizes capitalism, even the layout of the airport. When you finally go through the humiliation, and you feel like a cow, you feel like a bullock, going through the alleyways into the slaughterhouse. You feel like that when you're going through the security in an airport. And then you're looking at the screen to see where your gate is, but you can't. There's no quick way to go. You have to go this kind of tortuous route through this massive department store of products and all sorts of colors and everything like that. In this movie, I would say the sense is one of transience. The people in this movie, they exist, but they don't belong. They don't seem to belong to any specific place. Even some of them, they might have been born in that town, but they never really feel like they're from that town. It's a world of slaughterhouses and strip malls and urban sprawl. Whereas capitalism gives you color, communism gives you monochrome. And I would say monochrome is, a much worse camouflage. And that's, I think, how capitalism has fooled us, because it brings you a lot of color. It makes you less able to discern what's behind it all. And what is behind it all? I would say greed. Greed is what's behind it all. Why should anyone in the world be a billionaire? And why should a billionaire be considered your friend, your God? Public relations will be the answer there. But anyway, I see people in these circles, and it really gets my dander up. They are salivating, pinging out endless messages to these uber rich Elon Musk and Donald Trump and all the rest. And it's galling to see it. Grown men salivating like Pavlov's dogs, trying to get the interest of some guy who doesn't know them from Adam, and yet they're calling him by his first name. Hey, Elon. Hey, Donald. I find it pathetic, and it's one of the reasons why we're in this very sorry situation. That's my rant over. I will leave it to Brizer to give his score for this movie and any final thoughts. Then on to Blackbird, and then finally Southern Nordic. I will leave you with the last word this evening, or in your time. I'm guessing still afternoon. All right, Brizer, take it away.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that this movie is a lot about meat, and I'll just put it out there. I'm mainly a vegetarian, right? Now, I used to eat a lot of meat growing up, and I kind of just developed some health issues, particularly around joints and stuff, and I kind of looked into it. And also, there's a lot of iron in meat. There's this thing called there's a certain kind of condition where a lot of people who get too much iron in their system, they kind of get a little bit ill. I got that checked out, and I had a lot of iron. I had to do a lot of this, give blood, to remove the iron. And so I just looked into going vegetarian for a while, and I have to say it did help. Okay, now no way am I a strict vegetarian. I do eat fish. Occasionally I'll eat a bit of chicken and beef or whatever, right? But that's just occasional, and I actually enjoy it when I do eat it, right? So I'm certainly not vegan, that's for sure. I think that's a crazy kind of way to go. But each to their own and all that. There's a lot of debates over that, carnivore versus vegan, all that kind of stuff. But each to their own. So I just want to put that one out there. But I'm watching that movie, by the way, particularly when you see this mass slaughter of animals, it would put you off eating meat for sure. And that's the one thing I got, particularly the scene at the end, which I believe was a real footage from a slaughterhouse where they were just slicing up all these animals and everything. And it was quite gory, wasn't it? I mean, it was. But, compare that to a small farm where they slaughter their own cattle or sheep or whatever, and it's done humanely, and there's no, they treat the animals as best as they possibly can. But as Blackbird alluded to earlier, we all eat, all organisms on this planet, we all eat each other in one form or another, and we're no different. There was one point in the film which I forgot, which came back to me, I thought, which was very interesting. Remember when Amber and her social justice warrior friends got together to say, we're going to let the cattle free. Do you remember when they opened all the fences and they were trying to hoof the cart and get the cattle out? Go on, off you go, you're free, you're free. And they all stayed. They all stayed. Didn't want to go. And it just brings, this whole thing about the sheep, we're all herded, and we're no different really to the cows and the sheep. For humanity, for the most part, sadly isn't. They're offered their freedom. Here's the key to the cell. You can open the door and off you go. And they didn't want to go. And I believe maybe Frederick and Southern Nordic can back me up on this one, but I believe that after the American Civil War, when they released all the slaves from the plantations, a lot of them didn't want to go. So it just shows you that if you confine people into a certain way of thinking, they do not want to leave it because it's too comfortable, it's nice. Even though they're going to get a bullet in the back of their head at some point, or they're going to be sacrificed at the altar of capitalism or whatever you want to call it. They like it. Just feed me well, and I'll go happily to my slaughter. And I thought that was a very poignant part, actually, and of that movie, when they open all the fences, tried to whoosh the cattle out. Come on, off you go, off you go. There you are. You're free to go, and none of them left, not one. And I thought that was very interesting. Also, come back to like here in Ireland. Can I just ask Blackbird or Southern Nordic, when did McDonald's start in America? When did they kick off?
I think it was in the 50s, maybe 1955. Or right. I'm not sure, actually. Blackbird, do you know?
Their big transition was that it was founded in 1940 by Richard and Maurice McDonald. But then when Ray Kroc found out about it, Ray Kroc, Echo, 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 he came in 55 and basically forced them to sell out. And then it became the monster of McDonald's that it is today. But the original restaurant was 1940s.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie The Founder?
I have not.
No.
It's well worth watching. It's about the whole McDonald's empire and how it started, and it has Raymond Kroc.
Yeah,
as well.
No, it's just
very clever. Yeah.
Because McDonald's didn't reach these shores here till I think the late 70s, early 80s. I think it was around the late 70s. Because I remember when it all came out, everyone was like, "Oh, McDonald's," and there was queues to get into it, because this was something new, and it was like, whoa, and everyone wanted that Big Mac, and all the rest of it. And I just said those colors, that red and orange, it just attracts people. It's like a magnet. Come on in. Now, before that, we had fast food joints, but they were mainly run by Italians, came from southern Italy, and they're basically fish and chip shops, where you get your fish and chips. But they did burgers and sausages and meat pies and stuff like that. But one thing about it was the quality of food from those places was far, far superior. I suppose them being Italians, and they care about their food in Italy big time. You really got the best of food there, and it was cheap. And I remember, like, every Friday, when people got paid, you'd be going into the fish and chip place, and you'd be this was your meal for the evening. And they did pizzas as well, proper Italian pizzas, and they were great. And they've been kind of pushed to one side now because of these big burger chains that have moved in, and that's kind of sad to see. And the ones that have left over, a lot of the Italians have kind of moved back. They've made quite a lot of money out of it. They did very well. They worked hard. Give them that. 7 days a week they were out there. A lot of them moved back to Italy. Fair play to them. But now they've basically now they're employing people from all over the place. You go into a so-called Italian fish and chip place now, and it's again, blacks or Arabs or whatever working there, and the quality has gone way down, and that is sad to see, because that was a kind of an institution here, and I think it's the same in the UK as well. There was fish and chips was always a big thing, and again the quality has gone way, way down. So that is the kind of the Americanization of Europe, because once all these big fast food corporations moved in, like McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, all of them, the traditional restaurants that used to serve good, decent, proper food, which had nutritional value, are gone pretty much by the wayside, and it's now all just throw out whatever slop you can to people, and so that's sad to see. But as regards this movie, yeah, I think it was good. It was very good. I think there was a lot of good scenes. I would definitely recommend it for people to watch it. It would certainly make you think again about going to a fast food joint for and bringing your children to this, because you're not getting. First of all, you're not getting. It's fast, but you're not getting food. There is zero nutritional value in it. And you don't know what they're doing behind the counter. You don't know what those people behind the counter who are flipping those burgers, what they're doing in there. You don't know what's in that meat. It could be synthetic stuff. You don't know what the hell is in there. And it's becoming quite overpriced as well. And then you just see the whole narrative regarding bringing in the Mexicans and using them as a cheap labor, whether it be working in the meat processing plants or in the burger joints. They're just there to make a few dollars. They don't really care. And then you have the uber capitalists who are running all of this. They don't care either, because as long as the shekels keep flowing in, they're happy. And unfortunately, this is where we're seeing the society is declining, because once the food quality goes down, people are going to become more dumbed down. And it's all like, gimme, gimme, gimme. Everything has to be fast, Instead of waiting an hour to get a really good, proper, decent meal, you're getting slop in 2 or 3 minutes, And it's really sad to see that. I don't know how this is going to kind of change. Mindsets are going to change here. I don't know, because I go past McDonald's, the drive-throughs and everything, and there's lines of cars going in there, buying this crap all the time. So it just shows you the power that these people have and the power of advertising. McDonald's, we love it. All this kind of these quirky little catch lines that they put out there, and they're everywhere. They're all over the place, and it's a sad fact that we have to live with at the moment. So I would definitely give this I'd give it about 7.58 out of 10, because I thought it was a lot of very good things in there. Yeah, I think it came from a kind of very leftist kind of social activist type of viewpoint, but there was a lot of very poignant moments in there, which definitely gave you, pardon the pun, food for thought. So yeah, 7.58 out of 10 for me. So I'll pass it back.
Thanks for that, Brizer. Yeah, I meant to say as well that you just said, Brizer, about it being very much lefty, of its time, 2006. It probably comes from the angle as well, where they try, and they're still trying it, to get people not to eat meat. And they say it's a neo-feudalistic strategy, because, back in the day, the paupers, the poor people, they mostly ate vegetables. They didn't have money for meat. And you'd read, like I read some, it was a long time ago now, it was a book about a poacher in England, I think. And, he shot a rabbit on the master's land, and he was he had it in a knapsack, and he was trying to get back to his cottage, hoping he wouldn't be caught. And you read about some guy, from Ireland or England being sent off to Australia because he shot a pheasant on, his lord's estate. So I do get the feeling there is that angle that, they say meat has a lot of protein, it's good for the brain. The powers that be don't really want a population that is able to think, is consuming a lot of protein. They want them eating green beans and rice or whatever, make them more supple. Yeah, something I forgot to say in this movie, it's Don Henderson. So he disappears halfway through the movie, but it's when he's checking out. And this, when I watched this many years ago, it really hit home for me. The system, where you have to constantly, in this capitalist system, it wants you to give feedback all the time. What do you prefer? Do you prefer this or do you prefer that? I get loads of phone calls. I never answer them, but I check the number afterwards, and it's some company, market research. So even your mobile phone, you're getting you're not answering any calls now because you just presume it'll be some marketing company wanting your opinion, or do you want a contract with a different mobile phone provider, etc. Or are you satisfied with your current mobile? So there's this feedback loop, and when Don is checking out, he just wants to get the hell out of Dodge. He wants to get back to California. Obviously, he's not going to escape the feedback loop in California, by no means. But he wants to get back to his family. He wants to put this Surrey business behind him. He wants to just continue doing what he does, coming up with, clever names like the original names like the big one or Itty Bitties. But yeah, when he's checking out, the receptionist, she starts going through a survey with him. She's asking him, was he satisfied? Was there anything they could have improved upon? She's just firing these questions at him, and she's like, is there anything else? And he's like, my bill. So I thought that was very interesting. So now I'll pass it on to Blackbird, and then Blackbird, you can then pass it on to Southern Nordic. I'll let him have the final word. Before I do so, if you're listening to this, hit the like, share this around, and I will put links in the description for Brizer's Twitter, Blackbird's Twitter, and Southern Nordic's Twitter and his other social media, his YouTube and his Odyssey. So before I do that, I'd like to thank Brizer, Blackbird and Southern Nordic for their input this evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
All right, great observations. And yes, the checkout scene just really amplified the synthetic, scripted nature of this machine, where you don't have any real human interactions. It's this facade of scripted questions. Our associates are trained in what to ask, and it's the same thing in these little automatons. And just to clarify, McDonald's, it was founded in 1940 in San Bernardino, California by Richard and Maurice McDonald. They introduced the Golden Arches logo in 1953. In 1955, Ray Kroc, Echo, 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 joined the company as a franchise agent. And in 61 is when he actually bought them out. And currently, McDonald's has 69 million customers daily in over 100 countries, with more than 40,000 outlets as of 2021. So you just see that corporate sprawl of the Golden Arches around the world serving up goy slop. And like you said, who knows what's in it. And the final scenes of the transition from the kill line back to the desert scene, where the coyotes are now running another group of Mexicans through the desert, and this time it's Sylvia's friend from the assembly line paying the coyote to bring her two young sons, 8 and 11, to the United States. And it's interesting when one of them picks up a shoe of one of the people who didn't make it. Apparently, he's told by the coyotes that it's bad luck, leave the shoe there. And so there's that symbolism of the lost shoe of the person who didn't make it. And, one of the things about slaughterhouses is they've classically been used by the mob to dispose of bodies, especially dog food and cat food companies. That was notorious, disposing of bodies through mob connections with these processing plants. And so this idea of, the symbol of the migrant who didn't make it, did they end up in the vats of meat, right? And then when they come across the border and their handler in the van meets them, he gives the two young boys from their mother bags of Mickey's burgers, and says, "Welcome to America," and hands them the goy slop, right? And they probably thought it was the best thing they've ever had. And then it flashes to the boardroom where Dan is now, obviously you can see he's kind of broken, but still the company guy, he still has his job, and all that nastiness about, the packing plant has obviously blown over, and they're getting ready to release their new product line of the barbecue big one as the next launch, right? And so this idea of he realizes that he can't go up against this power that is this meat processing company, and they are the real power, and if he wants to keep his job, he just has to kind of ignore it and eat the shit sandwich, as the character said earlier in the film. Then at the end, you see the credits being flashed over the processed burger patties, just this endless stream of processed burger patties. And it's kind of like the migrants coming in and the burger patties. It's just this endless stream of cattle in feeding this corporate system. So, yeah, it was a very interesting watch for a Sunday morning. I'm glad Atma didn't watch it with me. I was going to invite her to watch it with me, but I'm glad I didn't. She wouldn't have spoken to me the rest of the day. But anyway, I guess I also give it a 7, maybe an 8. Just a really interesting film, and it's interesting that it didn't really do better than it did. So great to be here. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just jump in there before Southern Nordic jumps in? It's just what Blackbird just said there about Don. He's a nice guy and whatever, and then you can see at the end of the movie, he said he just has to go along to get along. It reminded me of the movie that we did betwixt Margin Call, the Kevin Spacey character, who was the same, working in this big financial institution, knew what was going on was wrong, but just went along with it, sell everything, destroy the economy, because why? Well, he's got a big mortgage to pay, and he's got a standard of living he has to keep up. And this is how they trap people. And that's, I think, what happened to Don here. So that's just my fine little input there, and I'll pass it over to Southern Nordic.
It must be a horrible feeling, though, when you realize the company you work for.
You're trapped.
Yeah, you feel trapped. You have a mortgage, you have all this, and there's no escape. And you hate it. Imagine trying to psych yourself up every morning.
Yeah, so that's why I'm so glad. Yeah, that's why I'm so glad I got out. I was in that corporate environment. I was there. Frederick was in it as well. And I'm just so glad that's all behind me now. But it was a lesson learned, and we move on. Yeah.
All right. Southern Nordic, we leave you with the final word.
Let's see. I just want to thank you again for encouraging me to watch this movie. I had never seen it. I had heard of it before, though, years ago when I was in college when it came out, but I had never seen it until last week. I would give this movie, I would probably give it a 7. It's not, I don't think it's like a cinematic masterpiece by any means. But what I liked the most about this movie was how it led me down all these other avenues of trying to learn about the world around me, about how things work. And I also think that it had an important message about the true nature of America, to be honest. I would give it a 7. And I want to say that it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to talk to you finally, Brizer. Thanks for having me on Betwixt, and it's always great to see. A fellow hillbilly up here, Blackbird. It was great to talk to you guys, and that's my thoughts on it. I want to thank you guys.